Delegates, if you could please take your seats and insert your voting cards into the microphone. We still don't have a quorum. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. We are now quorate, so if you could take your seats and we'll get our work underway. I'll begin with a few announcements. Firstly, when we finished our session last night, quite late at night, I said we would revert to the working program, and I realize in hindsight that wasn't very clear exactly where on the working program I intended to begin. So I hope you've all been keeping tabs on the information on the website, which indicates what agenda items are coming up today. In effect, what I intend to do today is to continue with the marine species that we weren't able to complete on Thursday afternoon. So in effect, I'm going back to try and catch up on our agenda a little bit. So that means we have proposals 39, 40, 41, and 42. Thereafter, we'll try and catch up with some of the working documents that, if time permits, that we were meant to do yesterday evening when we were doing timber proposals. And we'll continue to do that until lunch. In the afternoon today, we will, as the program indicates, deal with proposals on elephants and hippopotamus. So proposals 1, 4, and 5. I'm not entirely sure which order I will take things in yet, because we're trying to avoid a clash with Committee 2, which are still got to consider some elephant issues. So we will be dealing with all three this afternoon, and I'll give you the precise running order later. If we're able to make good progress on those and time permits, we'll continue with any remaining mammal proposals in sequential order. But clearly, as we go into next week, we are behind quite a bit. We have a lot of catching up to do. And I'll try and provide, or I will provide, more clarity on what to expect in the different sessions next week over the weekend. But the timetable or the agenda might be fluid, so do keep an eye on what's on the website and shown as the agenda items for the day, as the best way of knowing what we intend to take in this committee. And because we are running behind, potentially almost a day behind schedule, I'm going to have to try and hurry you up and try and implore you to be brief in your comments. I know many of you may want to make and may have written long, beautiful interventions, but with time being very pressing, I ask you to keep those as precise as possible and just focus on the matters that are up for decision. So other announcements I need to make. There was a late request from the chair of the Plants Committee to join the small drafting group I created for document 82 on medicinal and aromatic plant species. Exceptionally, in this case, I've decided to permit that so that the chair of the Plants Committee, I think, can bring some valuable insight and advice to that drafting group. So just for the record, that shows my willingness to permit the Plants Committee chair to join that working group. But by and large, if you haven't put your hand up during the committee session when a working group is created, I will be very reluctant to allow participants to join later on. And you're not permitted in the working group unless it's been recorded in the record here. And so please, if you want to be in a working group, when one is created, press your button at the time, not later on. I don't know if the chair of the Credentials Committee is here or not. Oh, I see Gabon. Chair of the Plants Committee, do you want to take the floor?
Oui. Yes. Chair, I would like to thank you for having given me a positive answer to my request. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Chair of the Plants Committee, a pleasure. I don't see if the chair of the Credentials Committee is here. However, in her absence, we have had an update on credentials at the Bureau, and in effect is no change. There are 151 parties here, and 141 of those have had their credentials accepted. So I think that is my announcements for this morning. So it just remains, I think, to move on to our first proposal for the morning, which is proposal 39 on Potamotrigon species, freshwater stingrays. The proponent is Brazil, and Brazil, I invite you to introduce your proposal. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brazil has a request to make to the chair. We were caught by surprise with the agenda of today, since we've talked yesterday night, and you said to us that you mentioned that we wouldn't work on proposals 39 and 41. So we would request that if you could start with proposal 40. Our team is arriving. They have had some problem in the traffic. If it's okay.
Thank you. We did talk, and I wasn't certain, as I said. So certainly, I am happy to move on to proposal 40 if they and to give your colleagues time to arrive here. So proposal number 40 then is on Rhinobatidae, guitar fishes. The proponents include Israel, Kenya, Panama and Senegal. And if one of those proponents wishes to take the floor and introduce the item, I see Israel, so you have the floor. Thank you, Israel.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, delegates. This proposal, number 40, which is being presented by Israel, Kenya, Panama, and Senegal, is to list the guitar fishes, family Rhinobatidae in Appendix 2. 6 species are proposed for listing in Appendix 2 in accordance with Article 2, Paragraph 2A of the Convention, and the names of these 6 species are listed in the proposal document. We also propose to list the entire family Rhinobatidae in Appendix 2 in accordance with Article 2, Paragraph 2B of the Convention, the so-called look-alike provision. The proposal also lists suggested new standard references, and these are written in detail in paragraph 11 of the proposal. Chair, there are in the world 5 families of shark-like rays, and 4 of them are already listed in the CITES appendices, but this family, the Rhinobatidae, has been overlooked. The family Rhinobatidae is made up of 37 species of shark-like rays that occur in some 110 countries in shallow coastal waters. In many of these countries, they have no legal protection, and there are no reliable records of catch or of trade. From information gathered from a wide variety of sources, it is very clear that they are subject to intense pressures from both legal and illegal fishing, as well as habitat degradation. The biology of most of these species has not been studied properly, but from what we know, they have a long generation length and very low reproductive rates. In all species that have been studied to date, the females come to shallow water in the spring to give birth to a small number of live young, and the males come to shallow water later in the season for mating. They then migrate to deeper waters until the following spring. This pattern makes them very susceptible to fishing in shallow waters by a wide variety of fishing methods. Chair, the IUCN Red List shows that 95% of the species of Rhinobatidae are in decline. 62% of the species are classified as endangered, and 10 of the 37 species are critically endangered, including all 6 of the lead species in this proposal. In addition, the IUCN analysis of the listing proposals for CoP19 has concluded that this proposal meets the CITES criteria for inclusion in Appendix 2. We wish to discuss for a minute the conclusions of the 7th FAO Expert Advisory Panel for the Assessment of Proposals to amend Appendices 1 and 2 of CITES concerning commercially exploited aquatic species. This FAO Expert Advisory Panel concludes that only 2 of the proposed species, the Brazilian guitarfish, Pseudobates horkeli, and the common guitarfish, Rhinobatis rhinobatis, only these 2 species meet the CITES listing criteria for Appendix 2, based on scientific data and technical information on the historic and recent declines. Even though the FAO expert panel determined that these 2 species suffer severe rates of decline, the expert panel has concluded that no guitarfish species should meet the criteria for inclusion in Appendix 2, and the FAO expert panel recommends not to support this proposal at all. So how is it that the FAO's expert panel's conclusion is the exact opposite of the IUCN's expert conclusion? How is it that IUCN experts say that the species meet the criteria for inclusion in Appendix 2, while the FAO expert panel says that they do not? It is our view that the reason is that the FAO panel, which knows a lot about fish, does not properly understand the CITES Convention and the CITES criteria for amendments to the CITES appendices. The FAO expert panel has concluded that this proposal should be rejected because there is no evidence that the species are affected by trade. As explicitly stated by Article 2 of the Convention, proof of affected by trade is a requirement for Appendix 1, and this term is not relevant for listing in Appendix 2 under the Convention. This has clearly been defined by COP in CITES Resolution 9.24, Rev COP17, on the criteria for amending Appendices 1 and 2. Chair, Article 2 of the Convention and CITES Resolution 9.24 clearly show that proof of affected by trade is an essential distinction between Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, and the proof is directly related to the higher level of protection afforded by Appendix 1. In other words, there is a distinct difference between the criteria for Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. There is no criterion for affected by trade for including species in Appendix 2, only for Appendix 1, and it is really disturbing that the FAO expert panel doesn't understand this. We wish to bring to the attention of the FAO experts a document which explains these matters. It is SC 70 Doc 65, which Israel presented to Standing Committee 70 in Sochi, entitled Guidance on the Application of Resolution 9.24 when Preparing to List Commercially Exploited Aquatic Species in the Appendices. We would therefore recommend that before the next COP, the Secretariat should conduct a workshop for the next FAO Expert Advisory Panel to teach them about the Convention and about the proper meaning of Article 2 and Resolution 9.24. In any case, Chair, our proposal clearly explains that the guitar fishes are critically endangered, that they are under intense fishing pressure, and that they have undergone great declines. There is clearly domestic utilization of guitar fishes and also plenty of evidence of international trade in their fins, which are in very high demand. Indeed, there is not very much scientific information on these catches, nor quantitative data of trade. The FAO panel said that the proposal should be rejected because there are no trade data. But this is exactly the problem that these species face. The lack of catch and trade data should not be a reason to reject the proposal, but rather it should be the reason why trade needs to be regulated and monitored. Since it is so difficult for custom agents and border control workers to distinguish among the fins from the different species of the shark-like rays, there is a clear need to list the entire family Rhinobatidae in the CITES appendices, as the IUCN scientific experts recommend. Having some species of the shark-like rays listed in the appendices and others not listed opens loopholes for illegal laundering, and it underpins the effectiveness of CITES. We wish to emphasize that an Appendix 2 listing of this family will not stop legal trade in these species, and it will not affect domestic utilization at all. An Appendix 2 listing will enable collection of better catch and trade data. It will ensure that legal international trade is not detrimental of the survival of these species and populations. An Appendix 2 listing will regulate international trade for the long-term benefit of the species and also for the benefit of fishers and local communities whose livelihood are dependent on these species. For all these reasons, we propose amending Appendix 2 by listing the entire family Rhinobatidae. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel, for the introduction, and with that I open the floor for comments by parties. Okay, I see Sri Lanka, then Peru.
Thank you, Chair. Sri Lanka supports this proposal, particularly as one of the lead species, Aquacaryobacchus variegatus, the striped-nosed guitarfish, is a critically endangered species found only in Sri Lanka and along the southwest coast of India. Proactive management is essential to ensure these species do not follow the same pathway as their closely related sawfishes, which are now functionally extinct in our waters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sri Lanka. I give the floor now to Peru, followed by Brazil.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. We would like to thank Israel for the presentation of this proposal. Having analyzed the document, we can conclude that the majority of the species are threatened and are subject to huge fishing pressure. The listing in Appendix 2 will not only guarantee that international trade won't damage the survival of these species, but also will allow to gather better trade data. Of course, Peru supports the listing of the Rhinobatidae species in Appendix 2, as we believe it does meet the criteria of the Convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru. I give the floor to Brazil, to be followed by Gabon, then Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brazil would like to thank the proponents of Proposal 40 and would like to express its support to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Gabon, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Gabon would like to thank the co-authors, co-proponents of this proposal. Things are clear. The guitar fishes are part of the most threatened marine species in the world. We support the listing of this family in Appendix 2, which is proof that parties want to regulate international trade that is non-detrimental to the survival of the species in nature. Indeed, it has been demonstrated that these species have the biological possibility of recovering if fishing is reduced considerably. The recovery rates are better than for other species listed in CITES. The listing of this family in the appendix gives the hope of reestablishment of these populations. The international trade of these species must be regulated through CITES. If parties act now, we can avoid extinction, and we therefore invite strongly all parties to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabon. I give the floor to Japan, followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Japan has a concern about this proposal and doesn't support it because we are not convinced by the view that trade is a key factor of the population decline. We also have a concern about the application of the so-called look-alike provision, which is the same as the population number 37. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. I give the floor to Indonesia, followed by Bangladesh, then Senegal.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia does not support the proposal to list all species from the family of Rhinobatidae in Appendix 2, since all of the species in Indonesia are rarely cooked and used only for local consumption with relatively low economic value and not for export purposes. Therefore, the inclusion of the species in Appendix 2 is not appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Give the floor to Bangladesh, followed by Senegal.
Thank you, Chair. Bangladesh appreciates the proposal of Israel. Due to frequent taxonomic changes and the problem of similar-looking species that cannot be easily distinguished by fishers, traders, wildlife managers, and other law enforcement agencies, Bangladesh recommends that the entire family Rhinobidae should include in Appendix 2. Government of Bangladesh has taken exemplary steps to improve the protection of these threatened sharks and rays, as well as for advancing shark and ray conservation management both globally and nationally. The list of sharks and rays protected under our National Act, Wildlife Conservation and Security Act 2012 was updated in September 2021. In compliance with the CITES commitments, according to this updated list of sharks and rays, families Rhinobidae is protected by our National Act. So Bangladesh strongly supports the proposal of listing the family Rhinobidae under Appendix 2 in accordance with Article 2, Paragraph 2b of the convention, the so-called look-alike proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Bangladesh. I'll give the floor to Senegal, followed by the UK. But Senegal, as a co-proponent, we've had a long introduction. Now, if you could keep your remarks brief, please. Thank you. Can we give the floor to Senegal? Is there a problem giving the floor to Senegal? If you just give us a moment, we'll try and sort it out. We know you're on the list and you're next, but it's obviously not working at the moment. Okay, perhaps while we're waiting for the technicians to, oh right, magic, you've come up in lights again, Senegal, so now you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Guitar fishes live in Senegalese waters as common species. They are very important for our country. This is why we proposed listing these species in CoP18. They're all practically threatened, with 23 being endangered and 10 critically endangered on the IUCN Red List. Some parts of these threatened species are in high demand on the market. It is almost impossible to distinguish between species. In order to implement the proposal adopted at COP18, the listing of the entire family is crucial for international trade and conservation of guitar fishes. Consequently, Senegal co-sponsored the proposal to list all of guitar fishes in Appendix 2, and we would urge all parties to support this proposal for the conservation of these threatened species throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I give the floor to the United Kingdom, followed by the Seychelles and the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. The UK thanks the proponents for bringing this important listing proposal to COP19. The UK is fully supportive of this listing proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. UK, I give the floor to Seychelles, followed by the European Union, then Panama.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time Seychelles speaks at this meeting and in this committee, we would like to thank Panama for their hospitality, and we would like to thank CITES for their continuous efforts. And I would like to congratulate you, Chair, on your election to this committee. The Seychelles fully supports this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Seychelles. And I give the floor now to the European Union, followed by Panama, then China.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We support the proposal as presented by Israel on behalf of the co-proponents to list the family of Rina Batide. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor to Panama.
Thank you, Chair. Panama, as a co-proponent, is completely in agreement with Israel's petition. This is why to try to deal with shark rays as different species, and As Israel said, we have not been integrating the criteria of CITES. As Japan said, lookalikes make it difficult to implement, especially for guitar fishes, where it is practically impossible, even by experts, to identify the fins when they're dried, especially juvenile species. As co-proponent, Panama entirely supports this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Panama. I give the floor to China, followed by India, then Liberia.
Mr. Chair, I will be brief. China noted that some of the species in this proposal does not meet the CITES listing criteria. China respected the recommendation from FAO expert panel, highly concerned the difficulties of CITES implementation of this proposal and Proposal 37, and do not support this proposal.
Thank you, China. I give the floor to India, followed by Liberia, then Niger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. India endorses the views of Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and supports the proposal of Israel to include guitar fishes on Appendix 2 of CITES. However, we would like to emphasize that our support is based on the decline that the species have suffered and their conservation status rather than the look-alike criteria in paragraph 2B of Article 2 of the Convention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. I give the floor to Liberia, then Niger, then Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Chair. Liberia joined as one of the range states for the guitar fish, and looking at the prevailing threat that associated with this guitar fish, we joined in Israel in support to the other co-authors of the proposal for the species to be, all species of the guitar fish to be listed to Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Liberia. Floor now to Niger, then Dominican Republic, then Somalia.
Thank you, Chairman. Niger would like to thank Israel and the co-proponents who thought it necessary to submit this very important proposal. Niger supports the strengthening of regulatory frameworks at the national and international level. Therefore, we strongly support this proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Niger, Dominican Republic, then Somalia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. The Dominican Republic, as an island state committed to the protection of ecosystems, marine and land-based, and their species, we support this proposal to include these species in the CITES Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominican Republic. I give the floor to Somalia, then Eritrea, then Togo.
Thanks, Chair, to give you the floor. Somalia supports the gator fish to be enlisted in Appendix 2. We know there's international illegal trade in the sea. Our support pays here to the declined population of the gator fish, and it's to be protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Somalia. The floor now to Eritrea, then Togo.
Thank you, Chair. Eritrea is a range state to many of these species, of guitar species, which we believe are very much endangered. We express our thanks to the proponents as represented by Israel. We very much support the proposal to include the guitar fish species, the Appendix 2, as presented by Israel, representing the other proponents, Kenya, Panama, and Senegal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Eritrea. I give the floor now to Togo, followed by Honduras.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are a coastal state like Senegal, and with a length of 50 kilometers, we have noted that these species are very rare, and so we support Israel and Senegal on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Togo. I give the floor to Honduras, followed by Nigeria.
Thank you, Chairman. As this is the first time that Honduras is taking the floor, we'd like to thank Panama for their hospitality and organizing this event. We'd also like to congratulate you on being appointed chair of this committee. Honduras fully supports this proposal.
Thank you, Honduras. I give the floor to Nigeria, then Morocco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to lend my voice to my colleagues to say we, in totality, support this proposal that all GTAs be listed in Appendix 2 to give them all the necessary protection. And so we do support. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. So Morocco, followed by Kenya.
Thank you, Chairman. Morocco is a range state of the Rhinobatidae species, especially two species, Rhinobatus and Rhinobatus evini, which are in critical condition. And this is why we support the proposal to include these species in Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Morocco. Floor now to Kenya, followed by Fiji, then Mauritania.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The population of guitar fish has declined due to heightened trade for young sharks for ornamental purposes, among other drivers. And therefore, Kenya sponsored the proposal presented by Israel in order to offer more protection and to generate data on the trade. Kenya thus urges other parties to support the proposal. I submit.
Thank you, Kenya. I give the floor now to Fiji, followed by Mauritania, then Burundi.
Thank you, Chair. Fiji thanks the proponents of this proposal, Israel, Kenya, Panama, and Senegal. Fiji would like to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiji. I give the floor now to Mauritania, followed by Burundi, and that's the final request from parties.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank Senegal, Panama for this proposal. I would like to recall that my country, Mauritania, has an Atlantic coast of 500 kilometers where these species proliferate. In this regard, I echo what has been said before by Senegal and Panama to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And now give the floor to Burundi.
Thank you, Chair. Although Burundi is not a range state, Burundi supports a proposal to list these species in Appendix 2 to improve their protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Burundi. Oh, I see Benin, you have the floor.
Merci. Thank you, Chairman. Benin is also a range date of guitar fishes, and in view of the danger posed to these species, we think it would be appropriate to list them in Appendix 2 so that the species can be afforded better protection. Thank you.
Thank you, and I've no further requests from parties, so I will now offer the floor to any observers who might wish to make an intervention. Okay, thank you. I was just waiting to see the range of observers to make sure I could give precedence in the right order. Sierra Leone, do you wish to take the floor? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Sierra Leone notes the importance of guitar fishes, particularly in the artisanal fishery sector. We have established marine protected areas, and one of the species for the local population that is being protected is guitar fishes. We note that the listing of these species in Appendix 2 will also support their conservation and also improve the protection in our marine protected areas and make them important for our food security. I'd like to therefore thank the proponents for listing these species in Appendix 2, but to add that countries and also the CITES Secretariat should consider support for data collection and capacity building for the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Resources, and also for the communities to be able to understand fully well how to protect these species and also to have the required data for their management. Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra Leone. I now give the floor to UNCTAD.
Sorry, Chair, I'm talking on behalf of FAO. I've sat in the wrong seat, my fault. Thank you, Chair. The FAO expert panel concluded that the 6 species of the family Rhinobatidae do not meet the CITES criteria for listing in Appendix 2. Domestic utilization of meat was stated as the primary reason for exploitation of all guitar fish species assessed. Hence, these were considered not to have met the CITES criteria for affected by trade of the CITES Convention. Data for the status of the common guitar fish indicated long-term decrease in distributional range in the Mediterranean. Data was limited and variable for West Africa, although stakeholder surveys in Ghana indicated probable decline. While the magnitude of the overall decline of the species was uncertain, the expert panel considered common guitar fish would meet the decline-related CITES criteria for Appendix 2. Decreases in distributional range of the Brazilian guitar fish was marked in one country, while the magnitude of the overall decline across its full range was uncertain. Despite this, the expert panel considered this species would have met the decline-related CITES criteria for Appendix 2. There was insufficient data for information to qualify population trends for the other 4 guitar species proposed for listing. From a management perspective, improved collection of commercial catch landings and discards data is required for this group. This is challenging due to the evolving taxonomic knowledge of the group. There are currently 37 accepted species, a quarter of which have only been described in the last decade. In regards to lookalikes, because of the evolving taxonomy of the family and known identification problems, the expert panel noted that any management measures would generally be better applied at the family level, Rhinobatidae. From a trade perspective, although based on a limited number of studies, the expert panel could not find robust evidence of major international trade in the smaller guitar fish of the family Rhinobatidae. Use of the fins could well be viewed in the context of any efforts to encourage full use of dead sharks, as is recommended as part of many national shark plans. While there's strong evidence of the family Rhinidae and Glaucostidae being found in international fin trade, there was no significant evidence of the Rhinobatidae. The likelihood of an Appendix 2 listing proposal achieving a good conservation outcome is tempered somewhat by international trade not being found as a major driver. The lack of fisheries information for the family runner Batidae across its range and the limited ability for authorities, therefore, to make non-detriment findings will make things difficult and could result in more illegal trade. In response to the proponents' comments on the expert panel review, I alert the party to the fact that the CITES Secretariat is an observer to the expert panel week-long meeting for the very purpose of advising on CITES provisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, FAO. I give the floor to IUCN, then the Erasmo project.
Thank you, Chair. This is an IUCN traffic joint intervention. 10 species from Proposal 37 in the family Rhinobatidae, the guitarfish, have been assessed as critically endangered and would appear to already meet the biological criteria for Appendix 1. Verification of international trade in the guitarfish is difficult as it is poorly documented. Despite this, one of the lead species, the striped-nosed guitarfish, is genetically verified as occurring in international trade. Further, a recently submitted traffic InfDoc 78 has thoroughly reviewed all available literature and found guitarfishes have been anecdotally identified as being exported from at least 33 countries and imported to at least 17 countries. Their limited detection in the fin trade may be due to the fact that they are entering the fin trade in locations other than the main survey locations and/or the current poor resolution of genetic markers for this group. Within the Rhinobatidae family, it can be challenging to visually identify fins and meat to species level. Additionally, it can be challenging to distinguish between fins and meat of Rhinobatidae from the species already listed in the CITES appendices from other families such as the wedgefish, Rhinidae, particularly for the fins of juveniles. Therefore, IUCN and Traffic consider that all species in the guitarfish family Rhinobatidae meet the criteria for inclusion in Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN. I give the floor to Erasmo project.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make this statement on behalf of 40 NGOs whose names will be submitted to the Secretariat. The 23 of the 37 species have been classified by IUCN as being threatened and 10 as critically endangered. As the 4 remaining species are in decline, it is necessary for all the family, the entire family, to be listed. It is very difficult to visually differentiate the derivatives of these species in commerce. A description at the level of family is totally appropriate and should improve the implementation of the law. We would urge all parties to adopt this proposal. Thank you very much.
Right, I'll offer the floor to one more observer, so we'll go with OP's Oceania Foundation. You have the floor, and then I'll close the list and try and bring this to a conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I speak on behalf of Opus Oceania Foundation. Given the uncertain scientific evidence, deficient data, and the absence of trade in the species, this proposal to list guitarfish and its lookalikes relies primarily upon the precautionary principle. But good governance, here I'm referring to the Rio Convention's principles 7, 12, and 15, requires, above all, that an international consensus is established, as stated in Principle 12, before applying the precautionary principle. The gulf between the proposers and the FAO and regional management fishery organizations suggests that we are not close to that. Also, among the parties here today, there is not a consensus, even if there is a majority in favour of this proposal. Opus Oceani Foundation's other concern is that Principle 15 of the Rio Convention requires that the precautionary principle is used in accordance with, and I quote, the capabilities, end quote, of countries, and that it is a cost-effective measure. But we know from experience that the existing shark listings are neither cost-effective nor implementable in a manner anybody fair-minded would label efficacious. In summary, the adoption of this proposal will cause irreconcilable antagonisms between those it affects and those who support it. That would be inconsistent with the application of the precautionary principle established by the Rio Convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Opus Oceana Foundation. So in listening to the debate, it seems to me there is overwhelming support in the room for this proposal. But there was opposition, I recorded from 3 parties in particular, Japan, Indonesia and China. And I would ask each of those, if they wish to take the floor, whether they would want to take this to a vote or not, or whether they could, having noted their comments, live with this proposal going through by consensus. So I'd very much welcome your reflections if you wish to take the floor. I don't see any, I see Japan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given this, the opposition to the proposal, we would ask, unfortunately, we would like to ask the voting. Thank you.
Well, we can do that if that will help to resolve this issue, recognizing the views of those who are opposed. So if you just give me a second to get my bits of paper, and we can start to get ready for a vote. So I'm about to begin voting procedure. And this is a vote for proposal number 40, the inclusion of Rhinobatidae guitarfish in Appendix 2. This is a normal vote, and the vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. This is a substantive matter, and the vote will be by a 2/3 majority. I remind you all again to stay in your seats and remain seated. We have Secretariat staff patrolling to make sure that happens. I will wait to get the okay from the technicians.
We are ready, Chairman.
Thank you. So with that, parties, you will have 40 seconds to cast your vote. Yes is in favour of the proposal, no is against. The ballot is open now. Thank you, technicians. If you could display the result on the screen. And this proposal is accepted by exceeding the 2/3 majority. Thank you. One moment while I sort papers out. Right, thank you. Just a little announcement. No. I forgot to ask the technicians to display the record of voting on the screen, so technicians, if you could now do that, please. Thank you. Thank you, technicians. I think we've had one full cycle there, so everybody's had a chance to check their vote. Before moving on, I just want to check with Brazil whether their relevant people are with you or not and have managed to beat the traffic. And if so, we could go back to proposal 39.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. They are coming in 5 minutes. Perhaps we can move on to proposal 42. 42? Is it?
Yes, Brazil, that was going to be my next suggestion.
Thank
really,
you.
seeing that you have also proposal 41. The next proposal then that we will go to is item proposal 42, which is to include Thelonota species in Appendix 2. The proponents are the European Union, the Seychelles, and the United States of America. And I invite one of them to take the floor and make the introduction. I see the European Union. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I have a small... Yeah, thank you. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the European Union and its member states, we have the pleasure of presenting Proposal 42 for the listing of the Thelonota species in Appendix 2. The three species meet the criteria of Annex of Conf Document Ref 17 according to Article 2, Paragraph 2A of the Convention. The Thelonota species have a very important role in the region of the Indian Pacific. Amongst the different invertebrates that have been fished for more than 1,000 years, their exploitation has increased greatly in the past 25 to 50 years and are expected to continue. Thelonota ananas and Thelonota annex are part of the sea cucumbers fished in the Indo-Pacific region. Their trade value, the easiness with which they can be captured, and the vulnerability with limited mobility of the adults, reproduction depending on the density, low rate of recruitment, weaken the species and lead to the depleted stocks. Thelenota are part of the biggest species of the family and are easy to spot. However, they are no longer observed in many regions, and they're also very easy to pick up and do not need very complex fishing procedures, despite their geographical presence. Many prefer specific areas, and they have a very important role in their ecosystems. They regulate the quality of the water. Predators are very few for this species, and fishing is the main cause for this depleted species. And exploitation has had a cascading effect in the ecosystems. For sea cucumbers in general, the biggest threats are the reconnaissance of this species for authorities fighting fraud. They are easily identifiable, and France has also published a guide that includes the 58 species that have been detected in international trade by FAO. And therefore, Thelenota must be listed in the appendix. They're being exploited mostly in Asian markets, but exported everywhere in the world. So this listing will allow to manage their trade in favor of fishers, local communities, importers, exporters, and help their preservation and allow them to play the role that will allow this species to continue in the future. Many parties have shared their concern, in particular the time necessary to carry out the implementation of this proposal if it were to be approved. And we hear these concerns, and the three proponents would like to amend the proposal to include a deadline of 18 months for its implementation. We therefore invite all parties to support this proposal to the listing of the Thelenota species in appendix. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union, and I invite parties to, or I open the floor for parties to make any interventions. Okay, I see first Senegal, followed by Papua New Guinea.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. The conservation policy in Senegal means we can only but support this proposal because we base ourselves in the fact that all species must be protected in order to guarantee their sustainability. Their listing in Appendix 2 does not prohibit trade, and therefore we support Proposal 42. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I now give the floor to Papua New Guinea, followed by the United States.
Thank you, Chair, for giving PNG the opportunity to speak again. PNG would like to state that there was no consultation with range states in accordance with Resolution Conference 8.21, reference to CoP19, was not conducted for Proposal 42 listing of Thelenota species and does not reflect in terms of data and scientific information that is available for PNG. The listing of Thelenota species is also unfair to countries like Papua New Guinea, and let me tell you why. The sea cucumber fishery is the second most income earner beside tuna fishery, and in terms of revenue for the country, but let me again stress here that it is one of the main revenue earners for our vast coastal and island communities with 1/3 of the population who entirely depend on the marine resource for sustenance. Seeing how important the fishery is in impacting livelihood through income generation and poverty alleviation, the government of Papua New Guinea places more emphasis on sustainable harvesting of sea cucumber resource by funding substantial amount of money into conducting stock assessment surveys, annual with a total budget of 2.5 million in PNG Kina, which is equivalent to $710,000 US. The government now relies on the stock assessment surveys and advice from fisheries management to either place moratorium or continue with fishing season, which normally runs for 4 months period. Now, having said how important it is to Papua New Guinea, the listing of the 3 species, however, undermines the efforts of PNG in managing the sea cucumber resource by placing strict management and enforcement guidelines with moratoriums imposed based on, as I said earlier, stock assessment and scientific advice. The justification of listing the species based on low density or less animals observed per hectare does not include stock assessments, studies done annually for Papua New Guinea to determine the stock status. Let me also stress that Papua New Guinea for the first time developed a non-detrimental finding with the help of traffic and a few others for the 2 Olothurian species of black and white titfish listed in the previous CoP19 meeting. I can assure you that we had issues and difficulty in implementing the NDF due to lots of associated issues, mainly in capacity of fisheries management generally and effectiveness of coordination between scientific authority and management authority, which I cannot delve further here. Mr. Chair, let me conclude by saying that it is only fair that PNG is successful for the proposal the listing of Telenota species be rejected or sold on work on identifying and rectifying issues on implementing the 2 Olothurian species previously listed. The challenges we faced in implementing the non-detrimental finding on white and black teeth was enormous. Therefore, before we accept the listing of Telenota species, we need to see the management strategy of 2 titfish and help countries to develop the NDF. And so there is harmonious in fulfilling the objective of CITES requirement. Thank you, Chair, and that's all for PNG.
Thank you, Papua New Guinea. I give the floor to the United States, followed by Panama, then China.
Thank you, Chair. The United States is very concerned about unsustainable harvest and trade in sea cucumbers as we see populations becoming depleted in various regions. We urge parties to join us in supporting the Appendix 2 designation for these Telenota species. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I think I said Panama, then China. So Panama, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Sea cucumbers in Panama are completely protected, but illegal trade is still a huge problem. None of the harvest stays in Panama is all exported, so we are directly impacted. The very fragile species and essential to the ecosystems. Panama fully agrees with this proposal, and we invite all parties to vote in favor of this proposal because very few benefit from this international trade, and the most impacted are the local coastal communities. In this case, again, FAO does not or fails, and the lack of data must not be an excuse to regulate a species. On the contrary, if we do not regulate it internationally, we will never have that data. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Panama. I give the floor to China, followed by Gabon.
Mr. Chair, in CITES aquatic species listing issue, China's position has been consistent. We support sustainable use of fishery resources based on strict management and respect the efforts made by FAO. With regard to this proposal, China noted that scientific data cited in proposal report is insufficient and not convincing enough to support the inclusion. China highly concerned the CITES implementation of this proposal and the sea cucumber species listed in CoP18. China does not support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, China. I give the floor to Gabon, followed by Sierra Leone.
Thank you very much, Chair. As guitar fishes and others, these sea cucumber species are being exhausted because of their huge value in the international trade. We would like to recall that a listing in Appendix 2 does not mean a ban on trade. Quite the contrary, it's a listing in Appendix 2 would allow a regulated trade. Gabon would like to support this proposal and would like to invite all other parties to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabon. I give the floor to Sierra Leone, followed by the Comoros.
Thank you, Chair. Sierra Leone notes the importance of sea cucumbers, particularly their medicinal value. in addition to their importance as food. Sea cucumbers can act as coagulants. They can be blood thinners. They are known to actually stop heart attack. They also have medicinal value for liver in humans. And noting the population of sea cucumbers in the waters of Sierra Leone, they are highly demanded for international trade. They are one of the species that are exported from Sierra Leone to other countries. We note that we have not been able to determine the abundance of sea cucumbers, and the demand for their trade is increasing, and so we observe that their listing in Appendix 2 will provide an opportunity for their conservation, while we'll be able to work to determine their populations. So we will support this proposal and thank the proponents, but to add that we appeal to the CITES Secretariat for capacity building support to developing countries, particularly for the NDF processes, so that we'll be able to determine the detrimental effects for the availability of these species. So we support the proposal, but add that we ask for CITES Secretariat and countries to support capacity building initiatives for developing countries and small island developing states. Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra Leone. I give the floor to I had the Comoros on my list, but they've disappeared. So I'll give the floor now to Fiji, followed by Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Fiji fully supports the proposal number 42 to include cucumber Telenotter species in Appendix 2 as proposed by the European Union, Seychelles, and the United States of America. Fiji sees the regulation of the sea cucumber species as necessary to avoid the reduction of the wild population to a level at which its survival might be threatened by continued offtake or other influences. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fiji. I'll give the floor to Australia and then to the Comoros, who have now reappeared on my screen.
Thank you, Chair. Australia thanks the European Union and their co-proponents for this proposal. Australia supports the inclusion of the proposed species on CITES Appendix 2 on the basis that regulation of trade is required to ensure harvest is not reducing the wild populations to a level at which their survival might be threatened. Regulation through listing will help ensure the species will be sustainably fished, resource into future generations. Acknowledging the fact that many sea cucumber species are data poor and stock statuses are often uncertain, Australia and the broader Oceania region appreciate the proponent's decision to provide an 18-month delayed implementation. This will allow parties in the region to properly develop non-detriment findings and implement these. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. I go now to the Comoros. You now have the floor, followed by Tonga.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Chair. It is the first time that Comoros takes the floor, and I would therefore like to thank the Panama government for their very warm welcome, and also the CITES Secretariat. And I would also like to thank you as a Chair for everything you are doing as Chair. For Comoros, we support the proposal by the European Union. These species are very important. They must be regulated, and we need to be able to improve their conservation sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you, Comoros. I give the floor now to Tonga, followed by Japan.
Thanks, Chair. First, Tonga appreciate good leadership to chair the Committee 1 here at the COP19, and also the Panama government for the effort and preparation they provide to host the COP19. Also thank for the proponent for the proposal, and Tonga really support the delay for 18 months. With that reason, Tonga is one of the WEN states, and we have a sea cucumber management plan, and we need to review it. And also, we don't have an NDF, and we need to prepare an NDF. And also, we have an implementation plan for this listed species, and we need to take it to our community. As PNC mentioned, this is the resource, our local fisher, and we don't have any alternative. And we need to give back the message, what is a potential and what is to support the livelihood. Once again, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Tonga. I give the floor to Japan, followed by the Maldives.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Japan expresses its sympathy with PNG. Also, we are a bit puzzled by this proposal. Japan would like to point out that in CoP19, after a long debate, it was agreed that the sea cucumbers should be managed by coastal countries. Japan adopted the regulation to ensure traceability of sea cucumber to address illegal catch in 2020. There is also a doubt from scientific perspectives about whether the population decline meets the listing criteria. Therefore, Japan doesn't support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. I give the floor to the Maldives, followed by Liberia.
Thank you, Chair. Maldives is an import-dependent country, and we only export very few coral reef-associated marine species, of which sea cucumber is one of them. In this regard, Maldives is a country that exports one of the proposed Telenota species. In the Maldives, we have improved legislations governing sea cucumber fisheries now prohibits the collection of all species of sea cucumber using scuba gear. More specifically, at management levels, a comprehensive sea cucumber fishery management plan has been developed recently, which restricts harvesting to hand picking and free diving only, including many other restrictions and measures. We strongly believe that the management measures being developed by the National Fisheries Department complements and adds to the CITES listings. We would like to continue to manage the fishery locally and nationally, given the sedentary nature of the species, the small-scale nature of the fishery, and our confidence in continuing to take early management measures if necessary. In order to effectively contribute to existing locally driven management measures and given the dependency of small-scale fisher-folk communities on the sea cucumber fishery and its effect on their livelihood, we support the amendment proposed by the proponents to delay for 18 months for implementations. And we also seek support and assistance to develop the non-judgment findings where possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Maldives. I give the floor to Liberia, followed by Niger.
Thank you, Chair. I join the other partners and the other party to support this proposal because looking at the valuable contribution these species made to the environment, and especially within our marine environment and the socio-economic livelihood of people, we wholly and more heartily support this proposal for the sea cucumber to be uplisted to Appendix 2 of CITES. Thank you.
Thank you, Liberia. I give the floor to Niger, followed by United Republic of Tanzania.
Chair, I won't be too long. The domestic policies on preservation in Niger can only mean that we support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll give the floor to Tanzania, followed by Mauritania.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania would like to congratulate the European Union, Seychelles and the United States of America for bringing up this proposal to include Terra nota species in Appendix 2 of CITES. Chair, United Republic of Tanzania is a range state for 2 species of Terra nota, which include Terra nota ananas and Terra nota annex, which appear to meet criterion A in Annex 2A of the resolution COP 9.24, Rev 17, for inclusion in the Appendix 2 species. We are in full support of the proposal, Chair.
Thank you, Tanzania. I give the floor to Mauritania, followed by the Solomon Islands.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mauritania would like to congratulate the European Union, Seychelles, and the USA for submitting this proposal on the listing of sea cucumbers to Appendix 2 of CITES, which would allow the regulation of the different dynamics for this species. This would allow not only to work towards the conservation of biodiversity and of this species, but very specifically to support sustainably these species. And for all these reasons, Mauritania would like to strongly support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauritania. I give the floor now to the Solomon Islands, followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. Since this is the first time for Solomon Islands to take the floor, we would like to register our appreciation to Panama for hosting CITES CoP19 in this beautiful country. We would also like to congratulate you, Chair, and commend you for your excellent chairship for Committee 1. Solomon Islands concur with Papua New Guinea and Japan and does not agree to the proposal to include genus Telenota in Appendix 2. Through sustainable fisheries management, the stock population continues to thrive in Solomon Islands and continues to support our coastal communities. Chair, these are important sea cucumber species that support livelihood of our coastal people, particularly women and children, who have access and benefits to these resources. Listing of Telenota sea cucumber species would have negative implication to our coastal communities, given that Solomon Islands is a small islands developing state is challenged technically and financially to meet CITES requirements for trade. Chair, should Telenota species be included in Appendix 2, then support has to be provided to small island developing states such as Solomon Islands. With that, Chair, Solomon Islands do not support the proposal for listing of Telenota sea cucumber species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Solomon Islands. And now give the floor to Indonesia, followed by India.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia shares the same views by PNG, China, and Japan. Not support proposal 42 to include all species of genus Telenota in the Appendix 2. The sea cucumbers are produced from catching by small-scale fishermen, and it doesn't well recorded, making it difficult to apply the traceability aspect in their utilization. Moreover, uplisting will have an impact on the livelihoods of small-scale fishermen. Thus, again, Indonesia not support the listing of genus Telenota into Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I give the floor to India, then Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. All the species of sea cucumber are listed in Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 of India, according them the highest degree of protection. 2 of the 3 species of the genus Telenota, that is Telenota ananas and Telenota annex, are reported from Indian waters. India therefore supports the proposal to include genus Telenota into Appendix 2 of the CITES. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. I give the floor to Jordan, then Vanuatu.
Thank you, Chair. As we recently declared our first marine reserve
and these species have been recorded in our region of the world. We are fully supportive to this proposal, as we believe listing it in appendix or listing them in appendix 2 would support our efforts to conserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. I now give the floor to Vanuatu, followed by some more.
Thank you, Chair. Since this will be the first time Vanuatu will be taking the floor, we would like to first congratulate you on your role as chair and acknowledge the host country, Panama, for hosting this important meeting. We thank the EU and the other proponents for this proposal. Vanuatu sees the importance of managing these species through CITES Convention. While only 2 species, Telenota ananas and Telenota anax, are found in our waters, Vanuatu has managed both species on a tag-based management approach, size restriction, and more than a decade of moratorium. Sustainable harvesting of sea cucumber, tea ananas, in the local communities also assist in improving their livelihoods and food security, particularly after tropical storm, cyclone, as Vanuatu is prone to natural disasters. Vanuatu supports the Telenota's proposal to be listed in Appendix 2, and we echo our support for an 18-month delay for the implementation, and would also like to further request funding and capacity building for development of NDFs. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanuatu. I give the floor to Samoa, then Ghana.
Thank you, dear Chairman. Samoa would like to thank the proponents of this proposal. Samoa would like to support the 18 months delay in implementation, as mentioned by Australia, Tonga, and Vanuatu. Chair, I would like to highlight that capacity building needs, such as the need to do stock assessment of sea cucumber in our waters, public awareness and development of NDFs to facilitate groundwork implementation for sea cucumbers are critical and necessary to ensure effective implementation. If this proposal is to be adopted, Samoa would appreciate the technical and financial assistance of partners to support our capacity building needs as stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Samoa, I give the floor to Ghana, then Burkina Faso.
Thank you, Chair. May I use this opportunity also to congratulate you on your position as a chairman for this committee. This is also the first time Ghana is speaking, and so we want to join the voices of others and thank the people of Panama for organizing such a wonderful conference. Ghana, like the US and the EU, fully supports the listing of the sea cucumbers to Appendix 2, and this is for the global good of conservation of the species, as well as also to control the trade. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ghana, then Burkina Faso, and followed by Somalia. That's the final request from the floor from parties, and I'll close the list there. So Burkina Faso.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Burkina Faso would like to thank and congratulate the proponents of this proposal and supports it firmly. Thank you.
Thank you, Burkina Faso, and I give the floor now to Somalia.
Thanks, Chair, to give me the floor. I'd like to congratulate with the European Union to propose this document. Somalia is a range state for the sea cucumber, so we strongly support to be enlisted the sea cucumber in Annex 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Somalia. That concludes the list of parties. I will now open the floor for a couple of interventions, perhaps from observers. Okay, we'll give the floor to FAO, in the right desk this time.
Thank you very much, the Chair. The FAO expert concluded that this Thelonota does not meet the CITES criteria for listing in Appendix 2. Thelonota's 3 species, the prickly redfish, amberfish, and candy canefish, are benthic species found at the limit of breath-hold divers. Historically, Thelonota has been resilient to extirpation across its range. Candy canefish is an exceptional species in the genus, a very rare species that does not meet the CITES criteria for affected by trade. Resilience of the 2 remaining Thelonota species was examined across 27 range states, including in the Pacific, Asia, East Africa, and the Middle East. This analysis of data on spatial coverage, density, size records, and trade data looked for range restriction and declines. 1 case of prickly redfish range restriction was recorded in Egypt, and in Mayotte and Samoa, concerns were raised about falling densities. Additionally, a single case of a marked recent rate of decline from a spatially limited study of prickly redfish in Solomon Islands was noted following the opening of a fishery that was under moratorium. No data showed range restriction or marked declines in the 23 countries and territories examined, with Australia, New Caledonia, Papua New Guinea, and Tonga reporting a long time series of fisheries data spanning decades that show consistent fishing of T. ananas, prickly redfish. For the lower value amberfish, no range restrictions or marked declines surfaced in this data review. From a management perspective, all controls operate at a regional or range state level, the main fisheries management measures being numerous and including licensing of export businesses as well as trade reporting requirements. Temporal fishing moratoriums have proved to be popular and somewhat effective. There's a long acknowledged paucity of reliable trade data, as well as other governance concerns along sea cucumber value chains for all species, with unlawful activity not uncommon. Genus Thelonota are moderate to low value species, the most valuable of the species, prickly redfish, yielding a wholesale return of less than $9 a piece, not accounting for the cost of fishing, processing, or shipping. Of the 3 species, amberfish is low value and there's minimal, if any, market activity in candy canefish. There's no lookalike provisions required for the genus. The likelihood of an Appendix 2 listing achieving a good conservation outcome, the 2019 of listing of teatfish species at CITES CoP18 provides some insights into the time and resources needed by range states to deliver positive NDFs. And under these conditions that are currently in place, an Appendix 2 listing of the genus Thelonota could result in trade of the species ceasing, as was observed in some range states' teatfish fisheries due to the inability of national fisheries agencies to achieve positive NDFs or conduct such assessments, or trade continuing without proper CITES documentation or with inadequate CITES NDFs. In summary, Panama notes that the CITES listing of Thelonota species could have inequitable and deleterious impacts on remote small-scale and artisanal fishing communities, regardless of the status of their sea cucumber stocks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, FAO. I'll give the floor to SPREP now, and then China Aquatic Products, and we'll probably draw a line there in terms of observers so that we can move on. So, SPREP, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. The Secretariat for the Regional Pacific Environment Programme is the Pacific regional organisation that provides support and advice on environmental issues to small island developing states in the Pacific. Sea cucumbers are essential for livelihoods for many remote Pacific communities, as you have already heard from all our Pacific parties present today, PNG, Tonga, Fiji, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu and Samoa. Implementation of further listings of these species will present significant challenges to our Pacific governments. Capacity building and financial support for stock assessments, development of NDFs, and other implementation requirements is essential for successful implementation of these listings if the proposal is accepted. If this proposal is accepted, we humbly request that donors and CITES Secretariat provide support either directly to our Pacific countries or through organisations such as REP and SPC to assist our Pacific parties. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, SPREP, and then I'll go to China Aquatic Products.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. As this is the first time for China Aquatic Products Processing and Marketing Alliance to speak, please allow me to express our most sincere appreciation to Panama for the warm and friendly way they have welcomed us all here. We think the proposal lacks sufficient population distribution and trade data. FAO experts assessed these existing stocks and trade conditions and found that they did not meet the criteria for listing. According to the market information regarded as low-value sea cucumbers, these three species are minority in sea cucumbers international trade and do not conform to the proposal of the situation. The role of listing these species in the appendix will be limited to solve the decline of the resources. We recommended the related international organizations, countries, and regions to conduct relevant resource surveys to understand the basic situation of the species exploration and utilization, to formulate conservation measures, and to consider the launching of artificial propagation and the breeding of involved sea cucumber species so as to alleviate and eliminate local fishing pressure gradually. Thank you.
Thank you, China Aquatic Products. And I've got several requests for interventions from observers, which I'm not going to take on this occasion, with my apologies and regret, as always. Earlier in the debate, of course, the European Union introduced a proposed 18-month delay, and I forgot to check that that was also agreed by the co-proponents. I will take silence from the co-proponents as indicating their agreement, and that therefore the amendment is one made under Rule 24.2. And I don't see any requests from the floor, so with that, I consider that as an amendment made by the representative of the parties that made the proposal. So in the debate, we've heard lots of different views. There's quite a lot of support. I also heard opposition, of course, from some parties. And with the previous proposal, I would ask those parties if they wish, do they want to put this to a vote, or is this a proposal they, as amended, that they could live with? So the floor is open for any of those parties to give me an indication of how they would like to play this. Okay, I see Japan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Japan recognized that some party actually oppose this proposal. So Japan would like to propose to go to the voting. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. That's fine. If you just give me a second, and I will begin the voting procedure in a moment. So this is a vote for Proposal 42 as amended by the co-proponents, and the amendment is that the entry into effect of the inclusion in Appendix 2 would be delayed by 18 months. Is a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU, It's a substantive matter, so it requires, or it's a proposal for the amendment of the appendices, so it requires a 2/3 majority vote. Again, I think all delegates are seated and are remaining seated. I will just wait a minute to ask the technician, or to check with the technicians that the settings are all correct.
We're ready, Chair.
Make sure that all delegates are seated, please. I still see people walking about. Right, it seems that everyone is seated now. Will delegates, parties, please take their seats? So, as before, we've done many votes now. Yes is in favour of the proposal, no is against. You have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is open now. Thank you, technicians. Would you display the results on the main screen, please? So based on the vote, this proposal is adopted with over a 2/3 majority. And if everybody's had time to capture that vote, if they wish, then will the technicians now display on the screen the individual votes of the parties? Okay, I think we've been through a full cycle there, so time for you all to have checked your vote. We can now clear the screens. Yes, thank you. And I'm hoping that Brazil's staff are present, and I invite you to make the proposal if so, and I apologize for maybe giving you a stressful ride through traffic this morning. So my apologies, but you have the floor, Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your comprehension and for giving us the floor. Brazil would like to introduce the proposal for the inclusion in Appendix 2 of Potamotrigon leopoldii in accordance with Article 2 of the Convention and satisfying criteria A and B for the inclusion of species in Appendix 2, according to Resolution 9.24 Rev. CoP19. This proposal also includes localized endemic freshwater stingray species, Potamotrigon Henley, Potamotrigon albimaculata, Potamotrigon jabuti, Potamotrigon marquesi, and Potamotrigon cineata, in accordance with criteria A of Annex 2B of Resolution Conf 9.24. Potamotrigon wallacei is an endemic stingray species from the Middle Negro River Basin in the Brazilian Amazon, with a high habitat specificity and can be found in the areas of small creeks and the flooded forests, which we call igapós. Potamotrigon leopoldii is also an endemic stingray species to the Xingu River and its two tributaries, and also in the Brazilian Amazon. It inhabits the rocky bottoms of rivers. All the lookalike species included in the proposal, namely, they are also Brazilian endemic species. Brazil is very concerned about the endemic low productivity neotropical species of freshwater stingrays, Potamotrigon leopoldii and Potamotrigon wallacei, which are restricted to the two tributaries of the Amazon River, the Xingu River and the Negro River. These species have shown population declines in their core habitats. Freshwater stingrays were listed in the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, Appendix 3, in 2017. But this did not provide accurate trade data and did not prevent unregulated ornamental trade from continuing, despite effort by the range state and other neighboring parties. I need just 1 minute. Seems to have some problem here. It has been considered that captive breeding supplies part of the international aquarius trade, but the demand for wild-caught species remain ongoing and at present is illegal. Until recently, Brazil maintained export quotas for the species. However, we found ourselves in the situation of having to cancel the quotas until the international instruments aimed at the conservation of the species, and in particular this convention, provide us with sufficient tools to allow its sustainable management. Therefore, the inclusion of the Potamotrigon leopoldii and Potamotrigon wallacei in CITES Appendix 2, as well as the lookalike species, is essential to avoid them becoming eligible for inclusion in Appendix 1 in the near future. The Appendix 2 listing is proposed in order to significantly improve trade data and compliance with domestic management measures, quotas and fishery prohibitions in protected areas, reduce ongoing international unregulated species trade, which has not ceased despite captive bred specimens now supplying part of the ornamental market, provide valuable support for the management and enforcement capacities of sub-regional and national fisheries and environmental management species. To conclude, We look forward to counting with the parties to this convention to support Brazil in combating illegal trade of these species that are endemic to our country. And in this sense, we urge parties to approve Proposal 39. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil, for your introduction. And with that, I open the floor for interventions from parties. So I see Senegal, followed by Colombia.
Thank you, Chairman. Senegal supports this proposal, Proposal 39, to continue to conserve these species. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal, and for your brevity. Colombia, followed by Argentina.
Gracias. Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank Brazil for presenting the proposal, and we'd like to recall that Colombia in Thailand, we had made a presentation on certain species which were not adopted but were included in Appendix 3, which shows the complexity of the trade in these ornamental fish. We support the proposal for the inclusion of these species in Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. I now give the floor to Argentina, followed by the European Union.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chairman. This intervention is from Argentina with Guatemala, Honduras, Peru, Chile, Colombia, the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, El Salvador, Uruguay, Paraguay, Ecuador, Cuba, and Costa Rica jointly. We support the inclusion of these 7 species of Potamotrigon in Appendix 2. There's an international trade. The taxonomy is uncertain and species are very similar. We support the inclusion so that capture in the wild will not reduce, endanger the species. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Argentina, I give the floor to the European Union, followed by Thailand, then Bangladesh.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. According to current references, the genus Potamotrigon is composed of 31 species distributed throughout Latin America. We thank Brazil for bringing forth a proposal on 7 of these species endemic to their country. These freshwater stingrays are valued in the ornamental fish trade. Unfortunately, considerable confusion exists about which species are traded, kept, and bred in captivity. The fact that hybrids between different Potamotrigon species are popular in the trade complicates the matter. We thus support the Appendix 2 listing, which could control the sustainability of trade of the species from the wild. If we recommend Brazil to provide additional information on the species to guide international enforcement, as well as to explain the practice of the establishment of a harvest management system. Since all Potamotrigon species are in Appendix 3, we would recommend a review of the trade in Potamotrigon species by all RAIN states to assess the need of future listings in this genus. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor to Thailand, then Bangladesh.
Thank you, Chair. Since CITES CoP19, the freshwater stingray in the genus Potamotrigon of the Colombian and Brazilian population has been listed in the CITES Appendix 3. Thailand has implemented domestic management of the Potamotrigon by controlling the breeding farm for the exporting. Now Thailand has regulated the import and export of Potamotrigon. Thailand has 62 farms for ornamental purpose of Potamotrigon. The view of Thailand that is includes Podomotaigon in Appendix 2 will help conservation on the species, but there are still concerns on the identification between wild and captive breeding, especially hybrid. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Thailand. I give the floor to Bangladesh, then the Seychelles.
Thank you, Chair. In Bangladesh, we are beginning to get reports on releases of these ornamental rays into the wild. They are invasive and a potential threat for our native species. We therefore strongly support for the listing of the genus on Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bangladesh. I give the floor to the Seychelles, followed by Bolivia.
Thank you, Chair. Seychelles supports the proposal 39 put forth by Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you. Seychelles, I give the floor to Bolivia, followed by Israel.
Good morning, Chair. We would like to thank the State of Brazil for having submitted this proposal. Bolivia supports this proposal. We are part of the Amazon Basin, and we invite all parties to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Bolivia. We'll give the floor to Israel, followed by El Salvador.
Thank you, Chair. We would first say, of course, that we support this listing, but we see this listing proposal for putting these species on Appendix 2 as a failing of the listing of these species in Appendix 3 that was done in the past. Appendix 3 was calling on parties to assist in the care in issuing permits for export or re-export of these species, and we note in our own experience that we experience trade in these species from parties that were not able to issue legal acquisition findings of these endemic species. Their founder stock was of, shall we say, questionable source. So we support the listing in Appendix 2, and we would encourage parties that are exporting these species to be very careful about their legal acquisition findings of their founder stock of these endemic species. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. I give the floor to El Salvador, followed by Ghana, and then Gabon. Can I give the floor to El Salvador?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. We support this proposal as it meets the criteria for its listing in Appendix 2.
Thank you, El Salvador. I give the floor now to Ghana, followed by Gabon.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I think we also do support the listing of the species to Appendix 2, considering the endemicity of the species to Brazil. I think it's a good effort that we all have to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana. Now give the floor to Gabon.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le
Thank you very much, Chair. We would like to thank Brazil for having submitted this proposal. We support the listing in Appendix 2 of this endemic species. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabon. I give the floor now to Togo, followed by Lesotho, then Benin.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to react in favor.
Je réagis en faveur de la protection de cette espèce, comme les raies, parce que
As it goes for rays in general, these species have become very rare in Togo. So we must protect them. and list them in Appendix 2, which will allow us a sustainable management of the species. Thank you.
Thank you, Togo. I give the floor to Lesotho, followed by Benin.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. This is the first time Lesotho is taking the floor in this meeting, and we would like to thank the government of Panama for hosting this meeting, and also to congratulate you on your election as the chair of this committee. Lesotho is in support of the proposal as presented by the proponent. The regulation of rate of the species will ensure that the harvest of the species from the wild is controlled and its survival might be threatened by the overharvesting. Listing of the species in Appendix 2 will lead to its better management and conservation. I submit, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Lesotho. I give the floor to Benin, followed by Turkey.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Benin would like to congratulate Brazil for this proposal and would like to invite everyone to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And we now have, give the floor to Turkey, followed by Mauritania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, we would like to thank you, Government of Panama, and you for impressive work and effort to CoP19. We would like to thank to the Brazil for this proposal. Because of all 7 species are endemic to Brazil, we support this proposal, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey, Mauritania, Niger, then Burundi, and that's the list of parties, and I'll close the list there.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mauritania would like to congratulate and thank Brazil for having submitted this proposal concerning the listing of this species in Appendix 2 of CITES, and we would like to support strongly this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauritania, Niger, then Burundi.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Niger supports this proposal in the framework of sustainable protection of these species. Thank you.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Burundi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Burundi supports this proposal by Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes the list of parties. We'll see if there are any observers who might want to make an intervention. Okay, I see FAO, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The FAO expert panel concluded that Wallace's freshwater stingray meets the CITES criteria for listing in Appendix 2, while the black chingu freshwater stingray does not. The review recognized these stingrays are subject to a number of anthropogenic pressures in their main area of distribution in the wild, but also noted their global presence in aquaculture and ornamental fish facilities within the review. For Wallace's stingray, the panel's determinants were supported by a population dynamics model showing a concerning change in fecundity of the population, while the black chingu, there was an unpublished survey on catch rates that was concerning, but the majority of the panel determined the status of the species did not meet the marked decline criteria. The expert panel noted that captive bred specimens from facilities in many countries, particularly Asia, can supply demand from the ornamental fish market, decreasing pressure on the fishery from the wild caught specimens from Brazil, although captive breeders would periodically need small numbers of wild-caught specimens as broodstock. From a management perspective, an Appendix 3 listing and national export quota system has since evolved into a suspension of trade for both species from Brazil. From a trade value perspective, captive breeding operations are obtaining colour patterns desired by the market through breeding and interbreeding programs. Crossbreeding in the wild and in commercial breeding facilities can yield fertile hybrids. This and look-alike species must be taken into account in reporting trade. In consideration of the likelihood of an Appendix 2 listing achieving a good conservation outcome, Proposal 39 highlights evidence that listing these freshwater stingrays under CITES Appendix 3 in 2017 did not improve the necessary trade data. An uplisting from Appendix 3 to Appendix 2 could potentially assist in increasing compliance and understanding of trade if greater compliance could be achieved. Owing to the interpretations of captive bred for stingray species, an Appendix 2 listing poses a higher regulatory requirement for aquaculture suppliers and their parties. This burden for both production and trade has the potential to delay or halt legal aquaculture facility exports, or they might continue without proper CITES documentation as in illegal trade. Any delay or halting of production from culture facilities would have a negative capacity and livelihood implication and could also have unintended negative consequences for wild stocks if illegal fishing of these populations increases to fill the gap left by aquaculture facilities, production declines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, FAO. I've only got two other requests from observers, so I'll give them both the floor, but I would ask them, I think the direction of travel with this proposal is very clear. So please be very brief. So Defenders of Wildlife followed by IWMC.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor.
Of 18 organizations, and the names of which will be submitted to the Secretariat. Potamotrigon wallacei and Potamotrigon leopoldi are endemic to the Brazilian Amazon. Both species are threatened by the collection of the ornamental fish trade, compounding pressure from an increase in fishing for human consumption. Both Potamotrigon leopoldi and Potamotrigon wallacei reach sexual maturity at a late age and producing few offspring. This makes this species particularly vulnerable to overexploitation and population declines as they cannot quickly rebound. Fishing for the ornamental fish trade is the most pressing threat for Potamotrigon leopoldi and Potamotrigon wallacei. Demand for these freshwater stingrays is driven by markets in Asia, Europe, and North America. Potamotrigon leopoldi is the most popular ornamental stingrays throughout Asia, as well as the United States and Canada. Many of these stingrays are sourced from captive breeding programs, but CITES records indicate that there are also stingrays on the market that originated in the wild, and therefore the demand for wild-caught specimens has not ceased. Potamotrigon leopoldi is the most highly exported species from Brazil and is also the one that is most frequently seized by law enforcement. Many specimens traded under other names are actually Potamotrigon leopoldi. Collectors prize Potamotrigon that are albino or have unique patterns. In response to these threats, Brazil listed these species in Appendix 3 in 2017. Unfortunately, inclusion in Appendix 3 has not led to the collection of accurate trade data, and the species continue to be traded illegally in violations of Brazil national legislation. And to address these threats facing Potamotrigon and Potamotrigon leopoldi, particularly their vulnerability to exploitation, the species should be included in Appendix 2 of CITES. And for this listing to be effective and to prevent identification difficulties for law enforcement officers, all look-alike species must be also included in this appendix. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Defenders of Wildlife. IWMC, you have the floor again with a request to be brief, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My comment is a general one that applies to all of the fisheries proposals that we had in front of us, including those which have already been discussed. It's interesting to note that whenever the panel of experts of the FAO concludes that the proposal meets the criteria, proponents and supporters make substantial use of it. However, whenever the panel concludes that the proposal do not meet the criteria, then its advice are ignored, or even worse. The panel become very heavily criticized, and even we witness a serious attack being done against the probity of the panel. Chair, this panel was created by the Conference of the Parties in order to assist it in taking very important decisions. But I think the time has come for the parties to analyze the importance and I will say the validity of the existence of this panel, which has become, in our views, absolutely useless, not because of the quality of its advice, but simply because the majority of the parties completely ignore its advice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IWMC. And to summarize on this, clearly on this proposal, I've seen lots of support. I haven't seen any significant opposition. I propose that this committee adopts this proposal by consensus. I don't see any objection to that, so that is our conclusion. Right, so we will now move on to item 41, Hipan cistrus zebra pleco inclusion in Appendix 1 as proposed by Brazil. So Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor once again. Well, Brazil is very concerned about the Hipan cistrus zebra, or zebrafish conservation, an endemic species from the Xingu River basin in the Amazon region. It's a species of slow growth, high mortality rate, and low fecundity, sedentary and territorial. In 2004, it was listed on the endangered species, initially as vulnerable due to international ornamental fish trafficking, and its capture was prohibited. In 2014, it became critically endangered, given to the significant modification in the species habitats, leading to the species population decline. Based on this, the inclusion of the species in Appendix 1 is imperative. It is our view that the species meets the criterion provided for in item B4 of Annex 1 of Resolution CoP19. It's evident that anthropic pressure has deteriorated the quality of zebrafish's habitat, with the species' natural distribution region being totally affected. Sorry. Just 1 minute. With impacts on the quality and availability of habitats such as change in depth, loss of rock habitat, which is critical for this species, change in flow and current flow, and consequently sedimentation of available habitats causing isolation between population groups. The deterioration of the habitat added to the excessive illegal capture of species to meet the international demand for ornamental fish. And it allows us to infer that in 10 years, from 2016 to 2026, the population decline of the species will be of more than 80%, with a high risk of extinction. Such as an assessment was endorsed by the IUCN Global Red List. In accordance with Brazilian legislation, currently the international trade of wild species is prohibited. Additionally, in Brazil, captive breeding for commercial purposes is not allowed. We, therefore, do not have authorized commercial breeders in our country. As trade and exports are prohibited in the country of origin of the species, foreign breeders need to prove the acquisition of their wild matrices during the period when capture for the ornamental trade was allowed in Brazil before May 2004, in order to prove that they come from legal sources. We hope to find consensus among parties to support Brazil in this difficult task of combating illegal trade of zebrafish. It's the best way to avoid its extinction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brazil, for the introduction, and I now open the floor for comments from parties. I see Argentina, followed by the Dominican Republic.
Thank you very much, Chair. This intervention is also being read on behalf of Argentina, Guatemala, Honduras, Peru, Chile, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, El Salvador, Uruguay, Paraguay, Ecuador, and Cuba. We support the listing in Appendix 1 of the zebra pleco, since this species was listed in 2017 in Appendix 2. It has a high level of illegal trade. The population is drastically decreasing and is critically endangered by the IUCN. And we have seen reports of huge exports of countries that are not from the range states. It's also an endemic species from Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. I give the floor to the European Union, followed by the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The species is endemic to the Rio Xingu watershed in Brazil, where it is strictly protected by national legislation. Due to its attractive appearance, the species is in demand for the aquarium trade worldwide. Currently, the biggest threat to the wild populations appear to be the recently completed Belo Monte hydropower dam project, which greatly alters the habitats of the species. To date, the implications for the species survival in the wild remain unclear. At the same time, the species is being bred in captivity in large numbers worldwide. The captive breeding likely meets most of the international demand and could also provide a valuable backup population for the wild population at risk. Thus, the EU and its member states are not convinced that the Appendix 1 criteria are met, or that an Appendix 1 listing would be a proportionate and useful measure to protect the species. Thus, the EU will not support the proposal in its current form. Instead, in order to provide sufficient protection for the wild populations and to gain control over illegal trade in wild specimens, the EU suggests to list the zebra pleco in Appendix 2, potentially with a zero export quota for wild specimens for commercial purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I give the floor to the United Kingdom, followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. The UK would like to thank Brazil for their proposal to include Hypancistris zebra in Appendix 1. We note the precarious conservation status of this species, its restricted distribution, and the intrinsic and extrinsic threats faced by a species popular in the ornamental fish trade. As such, it appears to meet the biological criteria for inclusion in Appendix 1. Apologies, but here comes the however bit. The UK is not convinced inclusion in Appendix 1 will contribute to the conservation of the species. Indeed, an Appendix 1 listing may lead to negative unintended consequences for the conservation of the zebra pleco. Whilst commercial use has been banned in Brazil since 2004, we understand illegal trade persists. The UK is concerned an Appendix 1 listing might further stimulate illegal trade of wild specimens from Brazil by curtailing legal trade in captive source specimens from non-range states. We understand there is no means to permanently and uniquely mark Hypancistris zebra. Therefore, implementation of trade in captive bred specimens would be problematic in Appendix 1. Furthermore, commercial trade under Source F, which has accounted for the majority of reported trade since the Appendix 3 listing in 2017, would not be permitted under an Appendix 1 listing. For these reasons, the UK does not support the inclusion of Hypancistris zebra in Appendix 1. Instead, we could support the inclusion in Appendix 2 with a zero quota for wild specimens for commercial purposes as proposed by the European Union. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I give the floor now to Indonesia, followed by Togo.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesian position regarding to the proposal 41 to uplist Hypancistris zebra to Appendix 1 is in line with the Secretariat recommendation in the basis that is not meet with the criteria, biological criteria in Annex 1 of Resolution CoP19 for its inclusion in Appendix 1. So we are not support this proposal to be adopted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I give the floor to Togo, followed by Bahrain.
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. This species is endemic to Brazil, but Brazil is recognizing that threat. And we can support the listing of this species with zero quota for wild species. Thank you.
Thank you, Togo. I give the floor to Bahrain, followed by China.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. Bahrain support the listing of zebra pleco to be included in Appendix 1 as it is endemic to Brazil and it is critically endangered according to IUCN. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bahrain. I give the floor to China, then South Africa.
China echo Indonesia's intervention and does not support the proposal.
Thank you, China. I give the floor to South Africa, then Bolivia.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa wishes to thank Brazil for their proposal. However, we are not convinced that this uplisting will have a positive conservation impact and caution that uplisting Hypancistris zebra from CITES Appendix 3 to Appendix 1 could potentially negatively impact legal trade from ex situ captive breeding facilities. There is a very real risk that increased regulatory controls on the currently dominant supply from captive breeding could actually increase pressure on the wild population. So we wish to align ourselves with the comments made by the UK and the EU and support the proposed Appendix 2 listing with a zero export quota for trade in wild specimens for commercial purposes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. I give the floor to Bolivia, followed by Switzerland.
Good morning, Chair. I would like to congratulate Brazil for submitting this proposal. Bolivia supports the proposal 41 fully for its listing in Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you. I see now Switzerland, followed by Japan.
Thank you, Chair. We would also like to thank Brazil for the submission of this proposal, and I will make it short. We are in line with the views of the EU and the UK and would support a listing in Appendix 2 with a zero export quota for wild taken specimens for commercial purposes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. I give the floor to Japan, then Israel.
Thank you, Chair. Japan does not support this proposal based on the fact that the freshwater species should basically be managed in the country of the habitat and the scientific advice of the FAO expert advisory panel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Japan. I give the floor now to Israel, followed by Panama, and that concludes the list of requests for, oh no. Okay, Israel, followed by Panama, then the United States.
Thank you, Chair. We support the proposal by Brazil to list the species in Appendix 1. Regarding the alternative proposal presented by EU, UK, and others, it seems unclear to us why they would propose that. The proponent has already stated that there is no export from the wild. The species is fully protected by local law. There's no captive breeding allowed of the species in the country. These steps have already been done by the country with zero quota from the wild. They're now asking this committee to increase the protection on this critically endangered species and to reduce illegal trade and to help control it with an Appendix 1 listing. The proposal to put it in Appendix 2 with a zero quota won't make a difference. On a procedural matter, Chair, we refer to Rules of Procedure 25.5, where there seems to have been a proposed amendment to the original proposal to change its scope, and we're not sure if we're discussing now the original proposal as presented by Brazil or the alternative proposal that was presented by EU. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel. But what I heard from the European Union was that they said words like potentially or suggest that as an option. To my knowledge, the EU can correct me if I'm wrong, they did not formally propose an amendment to the proposal. So it was a suggestion. Other parties have said they think that suggestion might be quite useful, but I've not heard, in my opinion, a formal proposal to amend the proposal. Of course, later on, when we've concluded our debate, I'll go back to Brazil and ask them for their views. But at this stage, unless the EU wants to correct me, that is what I heard.
In our view, we make the proposal to amend, and we propose to amend the proposal by that.
Okay, thank you, European Union. So you have made a formal proposal to amend the original proposal. We'll deal with that in due course. It does, of course, reduce the scope, so that is acceptable. So we'll come back to that, and we will deal with it under Rule 25.5 at the point when we need to. But I'm going to continue to deal with requests for the floor, and I see now Panama, followed by the United States, then the Congo. Panama.
Gracias, señor. Thank you, Chair. Panama would like to entirely support the proposal submitted by Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Panama. I now go to the United States, followed by the Congo, then Eritrea.
Thank you, Chair. The United States aligns with the comments made by Israel, and we commend Brazil for bringing this important proposal to protect one of its endemic species. We are very concerned about the provenance of founder stock for captive breeding operations of this species and believe an Appendix 1 listing is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. United States, go to the Congo, then Eritrea, then Canada.
Thank you, Chairman. My intervention is twofold. Firstly, I support the proposal from Brazil. And secondly, if I've understood you correctly, you said that we would come back to it if the proposal is presented as amended.
But as far as I have understood it, Brazil has made a proposal not for it to be amended. One proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. The Congo, you are correct. I did say that we would come back. There has been a formally proposed amendment under Rule 25.5. And we will determine that in accordance with the revised rules of procedure when we get to it. Yes, Brazil made the proposal for a full Appendix 1 listing, but the rules of procedure enable other parties to propose amendments. So I'll come back to that later. I now see Eritrea, then Canada.
Thank you, Chair. We fully support the proposal as presented by Brazil, and we thank Brazil for the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Eritrea. I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Canada aligns with the views of the European Union, United Kingdom, South Africa, and others. We have concerns that the species does not meet the criteria for Appendix 1, and it's not clear that an Appendix 1 listing would benefit the conservation of the species. We support the amendment made by the European Union for inclusion of the species in Appendix 2 with the zero export quota from the wild. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. And that concludes the list of parties requesting the floor. So I will try and take just check the time. Try and take a couple of interventions from observers. So I see FAO to begin with.
Thank you, Chair. The FAO expert panel concluded that the zebra pleco did not meet the CITES criteria to support an uplisting from CITES Appendix 3 to Appendix 1. Zebra pleco was classified as a medium-high productivity species. The expert panel agreed that there were declines in sustainability metrics for wild stocks, and that these declines are due to the construction of a hydroelectric dam and resultant habitat loss and change, plus illegal trade in the species to supply live fish for the aquarium trade. The expert panel noted that most international trade in the species no longer comes from the wild-caught plecos, but is dominated by fish sourced from aquaculture facilities in a range of countries, especially Indonesia, where aquaculture suppliers have both the capacity and infrastructure to service the market and increase ex situ breeding of the species to meet increases in global demand. On management, since 2005, there's been a national ban on the collection, transportation, and export from the wild. Since 2017, Brazil included zebra plecos in CITES Appendix 3. Despite the ban on the collection, transportation, and export for over 20 years, and the Appendix 3 listing being in place over the last 5 years, there appears to be a lack of sustained enforcement on prohibitions on the species in Brazil. From a trades perspective, it is likely that the total trade of zebra pleco comes predominantly from aquaculture. Since 2017, legal trade of the pleco is documented on the CITES database, but unreported trade is ongoing, so the data captured in the CITES trade database is likely an underestimate of the ongoing trade. Currently, industry data suggests that a single supplier from Indonesia alone already supplies the trade with over 10,000 fish a year. The likelihood of a CITES uplisting from Appendix 3 to Appendix 1 achieving a good conservation outcome is an outstanding question. It could potentially assist in increasing compliance and understanding of trade in Brazil if Brazil could enforce compliance. What is known is that an Appendix 1 listing will disrupt, delay, halt aquaculture exports, as they would need to comply with strict process steps for both production and trade, halting of aquaculture, even a delay when shipping live fish from commercial facilities to markets potentially means loss of investment and livelihoods. A decline of captive breeding sector due to an Appendix 1 listing could have unintended negative consequences for wild stocks if illegal fishing of these populations increases to fill the gap left if aquaculture facilities halt production and exports. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, FAO. I'll take two more comments from observers. Again, ask them both to be brief, and then after that the floor is closed to any further interventions from observers. So I'll take the Ornamental Aquatic Trade Association, then Pro Wildlife.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me the floor. I also speak on behalf of the Ornamental Fish International, the European Pet Organisation, the Sustainable Users Network, Pet Advocacy Network, and many other pet trade and keeping organisations, together representing thousands of pet businesses, millions of pet carers worldwide, and supporting livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of people around the world. We would like to align ourselves with the analysis of this proposal undertaken by the UN FAO panel of independent experts. As stated in the panel's report, this species did not meet the biological or trade criteria for listing. The listing proposal and the subsequent Information Doc 86 do not provide any data on the population size or decline, and has been revealed to make some erroneous claims about illegal removal. The expert panel interviewed the most quoted source in the proposal, who revealed that the figure of 10,000 individuals removed a month was the result of an unsubstantiated claim from an illegal trafficker, not recorded seizures. This figure is further debunked by the fact that the CITES trade database shows that legal trade is supplied entirely by captive breeding, which more than adequately meets the global demand for this species. As explained by Israel in relation to Proposal 40, when trade is not the reason for a decline in the species, it is not appropriate for listing on Appendix 1. We would also like to question the alternative solution that has been suggested for the species for listing on Appendix 2 with zero quota from the wild. The fundamental principle of the Convention states that all species which, although not necessarily now threatened with extinction, may become so unless trade in specimens of such species is subject to strict regulation in order to avoid utilization incompatible with their survival. Given that this species has already been banned from export by the Brazilian authorities since 2004, the species is already under the strictest regulation possible. Listing on Appendix 2 would not achieve any additional conservation benefit for wild populations and would impact conservation efforts in the species' native range. Captive breeders actively reduce demand for wild individuals and fund conservation efforts of this species in its native range. Listing on either of the appendices will negatively impact these conservation benefits for wild populations and discourage captive breeding. Given that captive breeding for export is not permitted in Brazil, any fish being exported from South America is likely to be illegal. As such, a more effective conservation measure would be improved enforcement of the existing ban by the range state and neighbouring authorities, rather than listing on the CITES appendices. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Walter. Pro Wildlife, again with a request to be brief so that we can bring this to a conclusion, hopefully open another agenda item before lunch, please.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is by Pro Wildlife on behalf of 11 organizations whose names we will provide to the Secretariat. The zebra pleco is a highly endemic species, undeniably threatened by international trade, as well as habitat degradation. Since its 2017 listing on CITES Appendix 3, field observations indicate that this species has continued declining, and a decrease of more than 80% is expected over the next 10 years. As the species is at high risk of extinction, Brazil, as the only range state, is asking to protect the zebra pleco under Appendix 1 and CITES. This species is sold in Europe for approximately 150 to 200 euros per individual. It is among the top 15 species of ornamental fish and kept in German aquaria, according to a study on exotic pet trade. We recognize that there is captive breeding of this species. However, pre-reviewed research indicates that collection from the wild for the international trade continues and is contributing to the species decline. A paper published last year found that 100,000 wild specimens are trafficked out of Brazil annually. Wild-caught zebra plecos can be found for sale online with a simple internet search. Despite Brazil's efforts to protect the species through an export ban on zebra pleco and including the species on Appendix 3, These actions have not been sufficient to protect the species from over-collecting for international trade, and Brazil is requesting our help. A CITES Appendix Listing 1 is necessary to allow this species to persist for future generations. Therefore, we urge parties to support Brazil's proposal to include the critical endangered zebra pleco on CITES Appendix 1. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Pro-Wildlife. So to sum up what I've heard today, clearly there's been quite a lot of support for Brazil's original proposal to list it in Appendix 1. I've also heard a lot of opposition also. There is clearly no consensus on that. There is a proposed amendment which we will address in the near future. But before doing that, I want to go back to Brazil and ask whether, based on the discussions and having heard the proposed amendment from the EU, whether you would see that as a way forward, or what other reflections you have. So, Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor once again. We have listened attentively to the views expressed in the floor, and we appreciate the support we have received for our proposal. Regarding the amendment proposed by the European Union, although it could be an advance in relation to the current situation, Brazil understands that it's not enough to protect this endemic species of our country, which we must remember is critically endangered. I would also like to emphasize that in spite of all the efforts we made in our country, inclusive legal efforts, this species is still illegally traded, internationally traded for ornamental fishing purposes. So Brazil will stick to its original proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. We now have one amendment, which is proposed by the European Union under Rule 25.5. There's no consensus on that. The proposed amendment is to leave the species in Appendix 2 with a zero export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes. So we will put that amendment to a vote. Under this rule, what we are voting on is whether this amendment should, in effect, supersede the original proposal. So if you, when we get to a vote, if you vote in favor of this amendment and that is carried by a 2/3 majority, then the original proposal from Brazil would no longer be on the table. It would be the amended proposal, and we would then do a second vote on the amended proposal to see if that was adopted by this committee as a recommendation to plenary. So I'm going to begin the voting procedure. I hope we've had quite a bit of practice with the amended Rule 25.5 now. So this is a vote on agenda item 41 with the amendment proposed by the European Union to list the species in Appendix 2 with the amendment that I read out a few moments ago. This is a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. This is a substantive matter, so it's a 2/3 majority. And I ask, as always, all delegates to be seated, remain seated, and I will check with the technicians if they are ready to do the vote.
We are ready, Chairman.
Thank you. So parties, you have I see a request from the United States. Is that a point of order?
No, Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification. Could you please just explain one more time for folks what a yes vote and what a no vote means on this vote? Thank you.
For the sake of clarity, if you vote yes on this vote, you are voting for the amendment proposed by the European Union. Is that clear? And if you vote no, then you are not in favour of the amendment proposed by the European Union. So with that clarification, parties, you now have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is open now. Technicians, will you put the results on the screen, please? So the proposed amendment didn't achieve a 2/3 majority, and so we do not consider it any further. Technicians, can you display the individual votes of parties? So I think that's a full cycle of votes, so we can now clear the screen of that. The EU's amendment isn't accepted. I don't think there's any consensus on the original proposal from Brazil to include in Appendix 1, so I will now put that to a vote. And start the voting procedure again. And this is again a vote for Proposal 41 and for the inclusion of zebra pleco in Appendix 1. We are doing a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. It's a proposal for the amendment of the appendices and thus requires a 2/3 majority to succeed. Again, everybody's seated, I think, yes, and I look to the technicians for a sign that they are ready to run the vote.
We are ready, Chairman.
Good, thank you. So, parties, you have 40 seconds to cast your vote. Yes is in favour, of course, of the proposal, no is against. The ballot is open now. Thank you. Technicians, if you'd display the results on the screen. This proposal failed to achieve a 2/3 majority, so it is not adopted as a recommendation from this committee. One moment. Yes, I always forget to ask the technicians to show the parties' individual votes, so please do that. I think that's a full cycle of party votes, so if we can clear that from the screens. So we've only got a few minutes before lunch. If the interpreters would just be willing to give us a few more seconds, we've just got a few more announcements.
Yes, Chair.
One of the things that we neglected to do when we were dealing with Proposal 40 on the Rhino-Batidae was that there was a standard nomenclature reference proposed in section 11 of the supporting statement. And I think with your agreement, we could agree that, and it would then be included in the annex of Conference Resolution 1211, Rev CoP19. I just want to check that the committee is happy with that and that there are no objections, and that would tidy up and conclude that proposal. I don't see any requests from the floor, so we will agree that. Yesterday, I created a working group on Proposal 49 on Pau, Brasilia. And at that time, I asked Australia if they would act as chair. The delegate from Australia who was willing to do that is now sick and unable to do so, but Argentina have kindly stepped in and volunteered to do it in their stead. So the new chair of that group will be Argentina, so that is recorded on the record. I think we now have some announcements from the Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Chair. There'll be 3 working groups meeting at lunchtime at 12:15 today. The Budget Working Group will meet in Pacifico 1. The Working Group on the review of the NEAP process will meet in ISMO 1. And the Proposal 49 Pau Brasilia Group will be meeting in Caribe 6, all those at 12:15. 2 other things, Chair. A reminder that the Lost and Found is at the information desk near the entrance, and in particular, yesterday in this room, an expensive-looking camera lens was found, and if you've lost it, that's at the information desk. And finally, Chair, a request to delegates not to take the headsets out of this room. If you've inadvertently taken one in your bag or to your hotel room, please bring it back. There are 70 missing. If the situation doesn't improve, then I'm afraid the organizers are going to need to ask for an identity document to be left in exchange for the headset. So please, we ask for your cooperation. If you've taken any away inadvertently, please bring them back, and please don't take them out of the room when you leave. Thank you for your cooperation on this point.
Thank you, Secretariat. With that, this session is closed, and we'll see you this afternoon at 2 p.m. Thank you, interpreters.
Thank you, Chair.